We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.
It will come as little surprise that homeschooling in the United States has rocketed over the last several years. Now, part of this is due to the encroachment of the umbrella term critical race theory, and partly because many Americans are beginning to see schools as little more than indoctrination centers. So what does the future hold for education, educators, and most importantly, the kids, who seem to have become the pawns in an ongoing culture war? Here to help us strip away the veneer of scholastic scheming is podcaster and author Jeff Charles. Welcome, Jeff.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So, Jeff, we see the number of homeschoolers going through the roof, and far from being a bunch of white folks in rural areas, as the big box media seem to be portraying, there are huge numbers coming out of the Black community. What are the latest figures on this, Jeff?
Yeah, so when it comes to Black parents homeschooling, between 2019 and May of this year, 2021, the numbers have risen from 1% of Black families to 8%. So a 7-point increase in Black families choosing to homeschool.
That is a huge rise. That's just a ridiculously huge number. Now, tell me, is this really because parents feel that schools are more about indoctrination rather than education? And if so, are their fears well-founded?
You know, it's something a little different. I think that the issue is pretty complex and nuanced. When they've done studies on this of Black parents who do homeschool, the number one reason is the lack of quality education. And since we know that a lot of Black people live in Democratic areas and Democrats don't want parents to be able to choose which schools they send their child to, a lot have decided to homeschool. Another factor that they have cited is racism that their kids tell them that they experience in class. And there's a lot of different stories and different interviews that have been done and numerous studies on that. So it's kind of complex. I mean, but there are some parents also that just aren't satisfied with the whole, with a lot of the woke stuff going on as well. So I think it's a lot of different reasons for a lot of different people. I think the pandemic had a lot to do with this increase.
Yeah, it was the impetus that I think allowed so many families to realize that they could homeschool. It's not something that's beyond the capabilities.
Yes.
And of course, homeschooling is the ultimate reaction to no school choice.
Yeah, I mean, they can force Black parents to send their parents to one school, but they can't force them not to homeschool, at least not yet.
Not yet, and I'm sure we'll come to that later. Now, Kentucky Democrat Representative John Yarmouth, he recently made a few waves by saying that parents don't know what's best for their children. This strikes me as a massive overreach of his position. I mean, is that where we're at now?
Yeah, Mark, we've been here for a while. Yarmouth, he just said the quiet part out loud. This is how the hard left views this thing. They believe that it's why they are willing to teach kids things without their parents knowing, and they'll try to keep parents not involved in the process. So yeah, they do see it that way. They see that your child as a belonging of the state, and for them to mold and shape their opinions in the way that they see fit. This doesn't apply to everybody on the left, but it does apply to people on the hard left. They very much believe this.
Yeah, as the Jesuits used to say, give us the boy and we'll give you the man.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
It's a way of indoctrinating or instilling a certain mindset in the old generations by taking care of them at the younger levels. Now, let's talk about these educators for a moment. Now, obviously, there are many fantastic educators. I was one myself for many years. But you wrote a piece for Liberty Nation recently about one of these teachers who'd basically had enough. What's his story?
Yeah, so this is about Peter Boghossian, who has become fairly well known, especially on the right, because he and some other people did a project where they showed how ridiculous the wokeness was going on at these universities. They wrote a series of fake papers with ridiculous subjects, and they actually got accepted to the journals that they submitted them to. So just to show the ridiculousness, he used to teach at Portland University, and he for 10 years, and then he quit because the atmosphere was becoming more and more authoritarian as far as silencing other views. It started to become less about educating people and more about influencing students.
Yeah, I think for those of us that have been following the trajectory over the last few years, we're not so surprised about this. We've written on it, we've discussed it it started with the banning of conservative voices on college campuses, which was written off as a right-wing myth at one point. And we correctly predicted that the next step would be the cancelling of all different opinions or viewpoints within regular schools' classrooms. Now that's come to pass. and we were proven right in our very sad predictions there. But what's the next step?
Yeah, I mean, the next step is they're gonna continue their indoctrination. I mean, if people like us, of conservatives, and even people on the left who don't want to go this far as the indoctrination and as far as the hard leftist ideology, they're going to push this as far as they can. And we already saw them trying to do it with the critical race theory and a lot of the woke theology that they're infusing into these classrooms. They're going to take this as far as they can, and they're going to spread it to as many different schools as possible.
Do you see a critical race theory as not really a theory in itself, but more a vehicle for ideas that have been bandied around amongst, let's call them the socialist left, for the last 4 or 5 decades?
Yeah, I mean, it's more of a movement. I mean, it is a theory. There is a theory, but there are a lot of different schools of thought within that theory. There are a lot of different ideas that come from it, but it is a movement. And like you said, it is a vehicle through which to influence what's going on in the country. It's not, I wouldn't say that critical race theory is as pervasive as what I call woke theology, because sometimes people get the two mixed up, but there is a lot of overlap, right? It comes from the same source. It comes from the same Marxist source. So there is overlap. And I do think that this is yet just one of several vehicles by which the hard left seeks to infuse their ideology into the classroom and other institutions.
It seems to me sometimes that there's an attempt at creating a culture war by various initiatives that people on the hard left know that people on even the let's call it the mild conservative right will want to push back on, and then it will create anger, and they'll misrepresent on both sides just to try and foment this burgeoning culture war. Now, it seems to me that parents are worried about their children. They're not getting so much of an education, but more of a cultural brainwashing. And just these last weeks, we've seen parents stand up in front of school boards detailing books that are in their children's school libraries that are purely pornographic in nature. Now, the excuses that have been given are that, well, the book was simply there by mistake. It was part of a recommended reading list, but it never should have made it to the shelves. Now, I'm hearing case after case that there was a mistake, but these books are on the recommended reading list in the first place. Doesn't this show that it's larger than just a couple of teachers and a board of administrators?
Yeah, I think it is. Now, I did read about one case, and it did sound like they may have, because the book had a similar title to the actual pornographic book. So I think somebody may have just recommended the wrong one on accident. However, this doesn't mean much. That may have been a mistake, but we've been seeing these stories come out, especially in New York, at these prestigious schools that parents pay a lot of money to send their children to, private schools, and they bring in teachers who actually teach about pornography and actually give seminars on pornography, and even having children as young as 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders learning about sex and other aspects of that. They've tried to infuse that in the education system here in Austin ISD. So it is happening, but they are trying to put stuff in your children's classrooms without you knowing about it. And guess what shed a lot of light on that? The pandemic, because children were learning from home, their parents were more aware of what was going on in the classrooms. And that's why we've seen this backlash that's going on across the country, which frankly is a positive sign.
And Jeff, final question, if I may. What's the future for education in America? It's a big question, right?
It is. It's going to ultimately...
In 3 words or less.
I don't know if I can say 3 words. I mean, ultimately, it's going to depend on how conservatives react, or how we deal with it. Are we going to push back, or are we going to let it happen? What's been encouraging is seeing this big backlash to a lot of the woke theology that's been taught, people going to their school board meetings. But what I like about it is that they're going beyond just complaining about it. You've got parents running for school boards all across the country. That's power. That's political power, getting involved in your local politics. If you don't like what your school board is doing, then you run somebody against them and you get them out and you get people in who the community actually wants. So if that continues, I think we'll be fine.
Jeff Charles, thank you for finishing on a positive note. Much appreciated.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Right after this short break, we're talking liberty with Scott D. Cosenza. The DOJ has overstepped its boundaries, and perhaps the courts are just waking up to this pernicious fact. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back with Liberty Nation Radio here on the Radio America Network. We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides. Who are we? We are Americans that believe in liberty. We are a project of the nonprofit One Generation Away. We are patriots who apply the founding principles to the issues of today.
And they keep moving the goalposts on us.
We are educators and commentators who love America and the Constitution. Who are we? We are Liberty Nation.